I would like to welcome you to Strategies to Facilitate a Cross-Cultural and Inclusive Online Environment, part of UCF's faculty seminars and online teaching. Our intention in each of these 30-minute seminars is to provide a brief treatment of a topic relevant to online teaching. The aim is to connect our participants to an array of resources and that allows for more detailed follow-up. While we believe that today's seminar will be successful if you walk away with at least one new idea that you can put into action with your online teaching. I would like to acknowledge the participants that are on site with us here today in the Faculty Multimedia Center, as well as those participating online via YouTube Live. Our participants are in good hands with Dr. Linda Futch as our online moderator and Jonathan Pizzo ensuring technical quality. At the end of the session, we will take questions from both audiences. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. MC Santana and Dr. Rohan Jawala. I would also like to quickly recognize Dr. Santana for being awarded earlier this week with the Valerie King Inclusion Impact Award from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. It is, after all, Diversity Week. And with that, I'll let Dr. Jawala take it away.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. It's wonderful to see everyone here today, and I have a passion for inclusion. As a matter of fact, I did my master's degree back in UK in inclusion and special needs. So I have a rich concept of inclusion. And after coming from UK to United States, I've always questioned the issue of inclusivity. How much advanced are we in United States compared to UK? But I want to start off with my first question. My first question relates to this one. How inclusive are you? And I'm asking myself the question, how inclusive I am. And when I position that question, I'm asking also other sub-questions. For example, do you think inclusion can be measured? And if you are of that concept that inclusion can be measured, then I can ask another question. Is total inclusivity possible? And if you suggest that it is possible, I come from a different positionality than you are from. I think that inclusion is a work in practice. We have to consistently try to improve our own design and how we can include others. Because if we don't, we are excluding people unconsciously. So that is the framework I want to look at today. And as I go through, I'm asking you to consider three dominant aspects that I've looked at. I've looked at the issue of inclusive education, I've looked at inclusive pedagogy, and I've looked at critical reflexive practice. Because three of these theoretical framework I have combined within a conceptual design that I have created to explore how we can achieve that. The first is inclusion. Inclusive education, as we know, and back in UK compared to United States, we talk about inclusion, but I realize, even when you go through the system, we are talking about inclusion from a legislative point of view. So what's on the 504 or what is given on the statement will support that. But the wider concentration is not given to everyone. So we think about inclusion in cost of cultural, social, and the removal of potential barriers. Now there's a social model of inclusion as well as there are two models of inclusion which I'm not going to go in. There's a social and there's a medical model. And I'm not going to go into that because I came across the whole disparity when I had to really request help for a family member recently. So I want us to look at that. But as we move forward in looking at inclusion, I want to bring up another concept. And here we are. We all have judgments to make sometimes. This person is sitting in this wheelchair and the parent or guardian or carer is saying something. But obviously, this individual is not impressed. So many times we have judgments. We make judgments, and our judgments are based on our schemas. Schemas are connected to our biases at times. So as we go forward, we have to think about a better way of doing it. And this author talks about inclusivity. I strongly believe total inclusivity is not possible. We have to have a work in practice. I have to consider my prejudices. I have prejudices too. And I have to act on that. Sometimes these biases get in my way of how I will design a course, support someone, but I have to be conscious of that to address these issues. And therefore, there's no system that has designed a total inclusive system, or whether we have a duty to help our students navigate this road and create cultural relevant curriculum to guide them. Professor will show us some examples later. Now, there's a possibility of inclusive, and I call this inclusive pedagogy because I think it's important. Inclusive pedagogy moves away from the design of thinking of legislative action to support students, but consider the overall student's ability. So it doesn't matter the color, the race, the religion, it incorporates everyone and ensuring that everyone is included in the curriculum. So we're paying attention to all aspects. So it's a work in practice. If we look carefully, inclusive pedagogy is also connected to critical theory. And when you make that connection, we're talking about using a sort of framework to address religious differences, cultural differences, and gender differences within that, race, everything. So within that, we are considering how best we can move forward. Professor will identify some areas for us. And if we can get there, the key thing for this, how do we move towards inclusivity? If I'm not reflecting on my action, how am I going to change? If I'm not reflecting on my privileges, how am I going to change? If I'm not looking at how I'm teaching and the level of success or limitations I've had over a period of time, how am I going to change? Yes, you can reflect. You can reflect all day long. But if you want to make purposeful change, you have to go to reflexive practice, making that change. And that's what it's talking about. You're looking at the issue of being inclusive, but how are we going to make that change? And Professor will identify some areas for us to look at on how we can engage in creating inclusive communities, because that's what we want. We want to engage in using students' feedback to ensure that they're learning. All these we have to reflect on our actions and make purposeful change in how we're going to design courses and how we're going to interact with our students and so on. And don't have a lot of time, but here it is. You have to engage in the reflection. And you have to, as you engage, you have to make purposeful change to your practice, how you design your course, how you arrange your discussions, how do you position individuals of the different religious persuasions, gender, and so on within your course. And then you have a commitment. You know what? You want your class to be inclusive. You want your online class to be inclusive. And you move forward for transformation. That's the change. But the change doesn't stop because it's always a work in practice. As I pass over to Professor Santana at this point in time, I want you to reflect. Reflect on the issue that inclusion and diversity is not just a rubric. It cannot be represented on a rubric, but requires personal action from me towards including others within the online learning community. Professor Santana, over to you.
I like that, Clicky. I move around the room so you can follow me or just follow the slides. It's okay. I name it Becoming Inclusive because I don't think it's something that we can obtain in one rubric, like you just said, or perhaps in a best practice, because we are also learning as instructors, as facilitators. We continue to learn every time we teach. So one of the things that I have done is really think deeply into who are my audience, where are my students, who are they, what do they like to learn, how do they like to learn. I am really, truly student-based, and this is very painful sometimes because I want to be MC-based. I want to be like what I like, not necessarily what they like. But in reality, we are educating them. So we have to think, how they learn. They learn in many different ways, many visual ways, and they don't always read. And this was very painful for me to actually say that my students don't read because I love my students and I think they're really quite good. But they scroll. They look down. They scroll subjects. They scroll bullets. They scroll bold words. So I had to kind of match that a little bit. And one of the things that I found myself in was with a student who was very articulate with me, discussing it orally in my office and sometimes over the phone. But then when she would come in and write her discussions or her answers were horrible. Were totally horrible. So I said, what is going on? Is this the same person? Maybe, well, it has to be her because I talked to her. So I brought her in And I realized she had learned the material, so I decided to give her and everybody else in that particular semester and from there on the chances of taping themselves answering a discussion or a question to ponder. And that was phenomenal for some people. Some people are really shy when it comes to writing, they're apprehensive, but they can really articulate themselves well in a conversation. So this is on the right, you can see the difference between having a text at the bottom and having the student upload. And they sometimes upload without their faces, just the audio. Another thing that I try to make them more interactive online is to create wikis. And the wikis I start, and I did timelines for first and second wave feminism, which is a course I teach. And I really want them to get excited about history. And as you know, some students are not excited about history, and in my case, her story, because it's about women. So I created this 7 years ago, and every time I teach, the wiki comes up, and then the students are added in the different information. The clue is you cannot repeat somebody famous or some event that occurred during those decades that has relevance to the first or second wave of feminism. So another thing I do with my students is I allow them to use the name that they want, not the name that is at UCF, so that I can identify them completely and comfortably about who they are. And I never say preferred pronoun because in reality it's not a choice for them. So I said, would you like to share your pronoun? And what is the name that you prefer? We're not talking about nicknames. We're talking about actual names. In an environment of mediated, I sometimes make name tags for the table, and I bring them to them, and they decorate that, and sometimes they put their pronouns, sometimes they put stickers in it. So the class starts knowing each other by name. So it's not just me talking to one student, but they talk to each other now. Oh, hi, Robert. Oh, hi, Laura. And they start identifying each other, it's really good because you create community that way. Some of the sources that I use really intentional because I want students to have different voices. I want students to understand that some people did not go to Yale, but they have something to say. So I create case studies in different issues around the world, as well as locally or nationally. I use authors and textbooks that are not always the ones that everybody picks. I do tech talks, I upload blogs, and sometimes I upload blogs with a disclaimer saying, you might find this offensive, this or that, or this might be too graphic for you. But they still have a choice. If they don't want to go through that, they have a choice to read something else. Again, you want to make the student comfortable. You don't want to shut them off so that they don't do their homework. One thing I found out that was very funny, but it's true. You know, we send them to watch things online because it's an online class, and then they would answer the most ridiculous ways. And I said, why are they they're not focusing? And I thought, oh, wait. Before you watch this, think about X or Y. Something very simple, not a quiz, just one or two things. Representations of the grandmother, or look how what kind of jobs men were doing at this time. So it's one particular thing that I'm going to carry on later, and that they really like that. And they have improved tremendously on their comments. Again, this is something they cannot copy online, but this is something that I generate for them. So it's not like a summary that they can download from somewhere else. I encourage all of us to be current in our issues. I teach intersectionality, so all these movements, the Me Too, the Black Lives Matter, all those things are my bread and butter. But if they're not your bread and butter, you need to know that this is very important for our students as well. So you need to understand what it is about. So I also discuss social class and ageism because my students are young, and they complain to me about other faculty members that are always dismissing them. Like they don't know anything because they're young, because they don't have a degree, because they don't have a PhD, and so forth. So I find that terrible because if we educate them, we open their mind to the world. But if they're shutting down with us, then we're not educating them. So I'm very sensitive about bringing, for example, when we talk in activism, we talk about if I say the word banker, what visual comes to your mind? And then we challenge that. And then I say, well, I was thinking about a 20-year-old Latina woman. And nobody was thinking about that, especially the 20-year-old. Who is a banker at age 20? And I said, well, they are. They are people like that. Ways that I have tried to be innovative on service learning. We do plenty of service learning, and we think globally, but we act locally because our students cannot take a plane and go to Germany. So they have to stay put in their jobs and in their lives. So we try to engage them in very various ways through social media. And I follow them as well as they follow me. So I have different accounts so that my students can see part of my activism, but not necessarily my personal issues with my family. And I did this exercise on creating the final mode, which was very interesting with my students. And this I really recommend. If you find a class who is very mature, you know who they are right about after the first month. You know if they're reading, if they're very responsive, if they're challenging you, if they're bringing new sources. This might be good for them to create the last module. So they do the whole thing. Now you follow the same pattern you always do. So I have objectives, and then I have the selection of reading and resources. And then within that, I could have a guest speaker or somebody that we tape or a tech talk. And then usually I have either a writing, a discussion, or a quiz. So they decide the content that cannot be repeated, right? They decide what is it that they want to learn on that last module, and they decide who they want to hear from. I cannot tell you what a wonderful job they have done doing that. And they're not pedagogically sound. They're students. But they know what works for them. But because you have shown them a pattern, if we have 7 modules, they have seen 6 other modules, so they kind of know the rigor that you put into it, the kind of sources that you're using. So actually they can do it. They can really do it. And they really enjoy it. They use it for their electronic portfolios. They tell their parents when they're doing the module, I invite anybody who wants to come or their friends or loved ones. And they're just very excited for others to go in and look at them online. Another issue that I have encountered often is the wellness of my students and how much they burn out as activists and their mental health. And this is not a joke. This is very serious. And anxiety is everywhere. They're anxious. I would not say the word depressed. I would say anxious. And that anxiety really immobilizes them. It creates them to be fearful. And they're not behaving or acting in their best way. Academically, they do get affected. So that's another thing that I'm constantly in communication with them. When they submit an assignment and it's kind of bad, I tell them, this was not your best effort. Are you okay? Are you safe? Are you not well? Do you have other deadlines? Just a very quick one-liner to them when I do the speed grader, writing the speed grader. They said, I have never heard from a teacher right away. Usually it's at the end when I have an average of 42, but never, through the process. And I said, well, because I noticed that you did a B+ in the first discussion, and this is like a D-. So something is going on when the subject is not that different. So I know we're busy, but I do believe people respond to the way they're treated. And when I treat them with kindness and I do those one-liners, they respond. And usually they don't make up stuff. Another thing that I have discovered is that audiovisuals have to be shorter. We have 1-hour documentaries. 1 hour is like a century, okay? It's very, very long. So sometimes I say, look at this segment from here to there. Or I say, look at this segment, and then I propose in the discussion to look at another segment during the documentary. So they're looking at 2 things now. And of course, I use Canopy all the time. Canopy is wonderful. You can stream right from your web course. And for women and gender studies, they have the best variety. Actually, now I watch Canopy at home in my computer. Yes. When you are online and you have on the left column you have library resources. Let me repeat your question that you're not familiar with Canopy. Canopy is a service of videos in our library. So on the left side of the menu, you're gonna see library resources, and then you're gonna go journals and click on that. And at the bottom, it's gonna have A to Z. Just click on the K. And that's the first thing that comes is canopy. And then you just do a search on top of the cursor in canopy. Oh boy, get ready. And they're very current. So you are watching things that are very current and that you need to explain quickly to somebody. And then you have a documentary. Of course, they're documentaries, so you know they have a point of entry. They have an opinion. So as long as you are aware and you told the students, this is what the documentarian was trying to do. But again, that's my TV now. I watch Canopy at night. And we have some resources for added more inclusion pedagogy and transformative learning. And of course, we're open to your questions. Was I too fast?
That's perfect timing, actually. So thank you very much, MC and Rohan. We can move into the question and answer portion of our segment now. We have a couple that came in online, so we can respond to those pretty quickly while those in the room can get your ideas together. So we have one. Someone said, I found it really interesting giving students the option to present their discussions orally. I like this attitude. What kind of balance is necessary between giving students options to express themselves how they choose and challenging them to express themselves in ways that they are not necessarily good at?
Well, the format was the same. For example, when they do discussions, they need to give me the sources, and they cannot be, of course, Wikipedia. And they can use 2 of the sources that I'm providing on that module, but they have to add 2 others. And the 2 others have to be of rigor, not just, oh, I heard this on my way, from school in the radio. So they're using that as they're verbalizing it. And when we have the oral, I give them some kind of a time limitation. But in all honesty, the minimum for me in a discussion is 100 words. That's the minimum. So I have students that I don't have maximum in discussions because I think that once you are rolling, you should just roll ahead and continue. I'm going to read, 5 more paragraphs. That's okay. So I give them a limit of 4 minutes orally, no more, because I think that's just like a very long commercial, right?
And we have one other question about the wiki that you're using.
Oh.
They asked, is that the wiki within the LMS or in Wikipedia?
That's a wiki I created, and that was just difficult. I'm not going to lie. Women's history is not anywhere, clearly. So I took a Native American timeline, and I turned it into the wiki. I took an African American history timeline and turned it into the wiki. I took a women's movement timeline and put it in the wiki. And then I took the Chicana labor movement timeline and put it in the wiki. So there's 4 elements in the wiki. And then I left a lot of things out so that the students could enter, so that I would not take, the best stuffs for them. But for example, after one person put Harriet Tubman, we can't have her again. She's taken.
And I guess to also kind of follow up on that, I know that yours is actually in the LMS, so that one is a Canvas page, correct? And so
Yes.
that's a page that the students can actually edit in there, so that
Yes.
ongoing timeline gets copied from course to course and just keeps growing. And as you said, the same people and the same events can't be reused. But yes, it is created in the Canvas LMS in web courses. So that's just a page that you can give edit access to your students so they can edit.
Yes,
there.
and it's I like it because it's pretty cool. You can put a recording. Like I have like a folk song by Bob Dylan, just because I love Bob Dylan. Talking about women and so forth. And you can have a map. You could have a photo. You could have any kind of correspondence. So they can upload other things that are not just exactly what you're expecting, which is a portrait of somebody.
Okay, so sorry. Here we can. So your online audience can hear our question, if you would.
Okay, that's okay. I have question regarding how we can make a wiki, if it's appropriate to ask. So how we can make wiki?
Or how you make a wiki?
Yes.
A wiki is a document that is generated by anyone, but can be administered or changed by anyone as well. So on Canvas, you can put who's the administrator, and you can say faculty, or you can say student all, faculty and students. So that is the wiki, because then I have a document, DOC, a doc, that I have started. And then on the top, it has all the instructions that I want them to say. For example, they have to put image / map, and then underscore Santana, which is my last name. But because it's 7 years now, they have to put their last name and their first initial because now we're having a lot of Johnsons and Smith coming back, and they're not the right person. The only thing is that when I'm grading, I sit down and I print it all, and then I go just visually and I check really quickly, but sometimes I don't see them. So I would text you or I would send you an email, say, hey, I don't see your entry. I know you have done it, right? Not trying to be nice. And then sometimes they hurry immediately and they put it on. And of course, I know they have just put it on because I printed it. But they're still within the deadline. I call them before the deadline. I said, oh, I have not seen your entry. And let's say the deadline is Friday. So today is Wednesday, so you have 2 more days to do it, and you will do it so that you get your points. So it's a little bit more complicated, but I really enjoy it, and plus they come with great ideas. And the first class, by the way, they will put a bunch of men up there. So I had a whole discussion with them online. And I said, well, this is the first and second wave of feminism. The reason we're studying this is because nobody tells us all these remarkable women in history. So I don't want any men. Not until I get better. So the second and third year, we start including, of course, everybody.
Another question come in online real quick. So how would you justify adjusting assignments to meet student strengths to faculty who think it would be beneficial for students to improve where they are less strong?
I think, in all honesty, in an online environment, there's a certain level of trust that we have to put out there and say, well, we're hoping that you're reading, we're hoping that you're learning. But at the same time, if they are not doing that, but they're pretending to do, I don't think I accomplish anything by being stubborn and saying you have to read 5 novels, because that's how I learn. I learn reading those 5 novels. But the other spectrum is you don't want to have a cliff note of just, oh yeah, this book was about the story of a woman, so broad that it could apply to anything. So depending on your content, the content that I do, because I am rigorous in the other parts of the class, I can have a little bit of freedom sometimes and be, more like in the middle, not completely rigorous and not completely, out of format or crazy, I guess.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So I guess if no other questions are coming in online, if anyone in the room has any additional questions, and I can run the microphone to you as well, so we're still connected to our online folks so they can hear us. Anyone else have any? No? And if not, that's fine. You can also contact us later, either me, Corinne Stoll, as the coordinator, or of course our wonderful presenters, Rohan Jawala and Dr. MC Santana. So please email us, shoot us a question if you have any. Additionally, there's a feedback form that we invite you all to fill out, either you on-site folks here or the people online. That's located at dl.ucf.edu/feedback. We can provide that URL. You'll get a follow-up email with it, so you don't have to memorize that. But please, you can fill that out. If you have any additional questions, you can put them in there, any concerns, and you'll also be asked if you would like a follow-up if you want to begin discussing this further with your instructional designer and applying it in your online courses or mixed mode. We have some here. So awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. And let's have a round of applause for our wonderful presenters.